All right, here we are, October 2021. Hi, everybody, and welcome, Graham. How are you? How have you been, Graham?
I'm good, thanks. How's
Norm-
everyone else doing?
yeah, normally I would have seen you last week in person at Maxis Admin, but these are not normal times. I did see your face on video, but I didn't see you in person. So I don't think I've seen you in person for quite some time. Uh, and
Nearly 2 years.
yeah, I guess that would be it. Um, Marcus and I were just kind of talking about that just before we went live, and look at this. We have 4 people here, 4 very different time zones. We have West Coast, East Coast. Sam, are you actually in Chicago right now? So
Just outside, yeah.
yeah, okay. So Central, and what's the time zone in Australia called?
Australian Eastern Standard Time we are.
Eastern Standard Time. Okay. Um, and yeah, we all see each other at these conferences, and now we're seeing each other on video. So
Yep.
not a terrible substitute. But Graham, man, it's good to see you. I miss you. And you have had a super interesting journey, I think. I was thinking before this meeting about the first time we met up, and I remember how this came together. I think I probably just posted on Twitter something like, "Hey, I'm gonna be in London. Anyone want to meet up?" And I think you answered and said like, "Yeah, let's grab a beer." And we did. We grabbed a beer at I think Victoria Station or something. And I just have been sort of like watching and been fascinated by your journey since we met, because I think you went from someone who has very much wanted to like make a dent in the MacAdmin universe to someone who has very much made a dent in the MacAdmin universe, which is just great to see. So when we first met, you were at Pebble IT, I believe.
That sounds right. Yeah,
Sounds right.
trying to engage long-term storage. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah, you gotta get it out of cold storage, pull it to the front. And while you were there, I think did both Crypt and Sal come out of your time at Puppet at Pebble?
They were both born there.
Yeah. Wow. And those live on as open source projects that anyone can check into.
Yeah. They're still mostly active. I mean, Sal hasn't had much love recently because everyone's moved on, got busy with other things, but we still use it. Much loved by our team here.
For anyone who doesn't know what those 2 projects are, if you could give a quick overview, that'd be great.
Sure. So Sal is originally started off as a dashboard for reporting monkey status, and now it supports other platforms, Chrome and Windows. On macOS, still pretty much tied to Monkey, but on the other 2 platforms, they're just a reporting agent. So pretty graphs and things like that. Crypt is a tool it's 2 tools. One is an authorization plugin which enforces file vault on macOS, and the second part is a server to escrow those keys to, and its main differentiator from every other tool that I'm aware of is that it actually has an approval flow, because most MDMs are like, YOLO, you can have the file vault key, no problem there. Crypt doesn't.
Yeah. I don't know. Does that? Well, we'll hold off on that. So from Pebble IT and with those tools under your belt, you went off to where did you go from there?
I went to Xerox to run call centers for a certain fruit-based company. I lasted a massive 10 months there before I decided that wasn't quite for me. And Mr. Keeley slacked me and said, "Do you want to come and work with me?" And I stupidly said yes. Regret it ever since.
So you are at Airbnb Do you have a title useful?
My overly complicated title is Senior Systems Architect, I think. I'd have to look it up. I think that's what it is now.
Okay. And
mostly it's hey you.
And what does that entail when people say hey you? What are they asking you to do?
So I'm the lead engineer on our client engineering team. So my team is responsible for all of our Mac, Windows, and Chrome endpoints across our corporate and call center fleet. I also, for some reason, own a lot of our how do you describe IAP? Sam, how do you describe IAP?
Modern access, like
Yeah.
application access, basically.
Yeah. Somehow my team runs that. I don't know how that worked out.
Because they access it from their laptop.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what we do. We basically secure and manage our endpoints. And cool. I guess we got IAP because it helps enforce our security posture.
Yeah, you mentioned security quite a bit, and you just gave a talk for MacSysAdmin conference on security, but you're not on the security team. So how does that work out?
No, well, I mean, security is everyone's job here. And my team helps inform our security policy, and we definitely have to enforce it. So, yeah, we do what Sam's team tells us.
Okay. I am curious. You mentioned that when we were talking about Sal, you mentioned that you use Sal at Airbnb. I'm curious, how does that tie in with other monitoring at Airbnb? I presume there's some regular monitoring and alerting platform at Airbnb, and now you have this sort of like one oddball dashboard or tool. Or does Sal feed into those other tools?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of its separate own thing. It's mostly used now by type more like management and help desk, those who aren't going to be creating queries in our centralized logging and those kind of things. And also it means that we don't have to get, obviously, all the logs we ingest have a huge amount of PII in them, which we have to be very careful about who we share that with. Whereas the data that goes into Sal is very carefully curated that it can be shared with pretty much anyone. Okay. So that's mainly the delineation there.
That's a good reason for doing it. It's probably more difficult, although there are tools to do this, commercial and homegrown, to enforce access control across rows in a table and columns in a in a database. So that's more work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're giving people anonymized data or sort of like sanitized, scrubbed data in the first place, that's a much bigger win.
Yeah, it's a much safer data set, that's for sure. And it's also one search box is a much nicer interface than having to come up with whatever particular flavor of SQL you need to do to query whatever data warehouse you're looking at.
Yeah, they all have their own sort of like little tweaks, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mentioned that you just gave a talk at MacSysAdmin, all about security. You want to give an overview of that?
Sure. I mean, it mostly came about from me being, I guess, frustrated is the word, about the number of myths that are perpetuated amongst our community about Apple's stance on patching and ways of securing your fleet, which are outdated if we're being generous about them, and incorrect if we're being less generous about them. So it was, it came about mostly from our patch policy, reviewing our patch policy internally, and You know, if I speak about patch policy, most people are like, whoa, you guys are crazy. Right? That's insane what you guys do. And like, well, we actually have no choice. If you actually look back at the data and what CVEs are patched in macOS, I mean, it came along like trying to preach the gospel, I guess, of N-2 is a myth. You know, Apple doesn't patch anything other than the latest fully. And if you're running anything other than the latest, you're not secure. That's the TLDR of that one.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm not entirely sure where that myth came from because it was certainly never policy from Apple. Maybe there was some like empirical evidence on and off a long time ago. But yeah, I agree with you. Like the N-2 thing has definitely not been reality for quite some time, or at the very least, maybe it is even N-1, but sometimes those patches take a while to get to N-1 versus the current build. And even those are kind of slow. Like my feeling on Apple's patches is that Apple is generally slow enough at patching this stuff. It's already late when they come out. So like you should be applying these pretty much day one or day two anyway.
Yeah, that's why the split brain iOS track that came in absolutely confused me so much. I mean, iOS 14 has already got unpatched CVEs in it, but there's still you have to fight to get onto iOS 15. Like we had to send messaging out like click this little button down the bottom, which you've never seen before.
Yeah,
iOS 15.
I was surprised at that also. I'm not 100% sure why Apple did that, but there must have been incredible pressure from some group that was saying we need to stay on iOS 14 for reasons.
I mean, the promise was that 14 would keep getting security patches, and they failed at the first hurdle. Right?
Yeah.
We got confirmation from Apple that there's one particular CVE in 15 which just wasn't patched in 14.8. Came out like 2 days before, 3 days, something like that.
And I was also surprised. I guess I was on the betas, and then I end up putting sort of non-test devices usually on the beta very late cycle, so they're kind of already ready to go day one. And like as a tech person, I'm very conscious of that. But I was speaking to a friend of mine. I don't know. I think it was just this week or end of last week, and I said, iOS 15 is out. You should update your phone. And I think it was when iOS 15.01 dropped. And, I said, there are these security patches. It's worthwhile updating your phone. You'll get some other little fancy benefits. And they said, yeah, I guess, but I'll do it when my phone tells me to. I said, wait a minute, your phone's not telling you to do this? Like you don't have a little badge number 1 on your settings thing? No. I checked around with some other people and I realized, like, yeah, Apple's not actually pushing this yet and encouraging people to do it, which surprised me a lot. I guess I hadn't paid attention to it, and I don't know if that's a usual thing for Apple or not, to delay advertising iOS so long. No, I don't know.
Like in macOS for the last however many years, like I think people haven't really gotten a pop-up for a few weeks, and then Apple did the thing where like they would seed the installer in the background. I don't maybe it was like a month, but I'm very curious how they treat this, because I feel like it's been this slide that's been on so many WWDC presentations or whatever of like, here's the adoption of the new OS, and it's just not there unless you're forcing it to happen. I'm sure it'll pop up, like it'll make that switch in a few weeks, but who knows?
Yeah. And speaking of like getting people to patch, that's I don't want to call it a myth, Graham, but if like sort of in line with what you're talking about, people always think it's N-2. there's also this sort of undercurrent I've found in the Mac admin community where they're saying like, hey, here's how you block the installer. And under very rare cases, I can see that making sense, but I would really love as a community for us to get to the point of, I've been running the betas all summer. We have things ironed out. We are ready to go day one. And maybe that's even with a small group in your company, but like at least like we're letting people install it. And if we've told certain people not to install it, they've just earned themselves a trip to, erase and install again. But like you should be ready to go ideally on day one. Graham, I think we lost audio for you. At least.
Yeah, sorry, I hit my mute button. There you go. That would help. Yeah, over the last few years, we have a pretty strong beta program. Last week, we force enrolled a decent chunk of our IT team into the beta. Yeah, we've never held back an OS update, and we don't intend to. And we also have contingencies. Like every year, we have to plan. Like, what if VPN doesn't work, or I don't know, some other critical app? But we've never had to do it, and we don't intend to do it. I think we consider we've failed if we have to send out that email saying please don't update. We've completely failed. We've failed our customers.
That's an impressive attitude.
And let's face it, we're going to be.
It was when before you started, and I was embarrassed by that.
Well, you should feel bad then.
Yes. But at least you recognized it and you were able to overcome that. I think that's super important, right? Like I think getting out of just talking about security, I think in any company you can recognize the gap between the idealized state and where you are. And there are two kinds of companies. There are the companies where everyone says like, yeah, but what we're doing is fine. And then there are the companies that say like, no, there's this gap and we know how to close it and we're all going to be working towards that. Obviously, super important with security, no doubt. But I think that goes for, engineering and automation and like, hey, we're doing all these things manually today, but we know we want to get to the point of full automation or, whatever it is.
I mean, at the end of the day, we're serving our customers, and I mean, we can have. Next week when the new laptops get announced, I mean, they're going to be running macOS 12. I'd be amazed if they're running Big Sur. I mean, how many thousands of orders are we going to get in for them? Like pretty much every single engineer in our company is going to want one.
That's impressive. That's great.
Well, no, they're going to want it. I don't know if they're going to get it, but they're going to want it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think for us, the irony is that we have everything working for managing them, but a lot of the dev teams and the dev tooling is not ready. And we've been warning them for months, and they still haven't quite done it yet. But once their engineers want it, I guess they'll do it.
And who's the burden of that placed on?
The teams who own the tooling. So the teams who own the Ruby stack and all the various Go infra and all that stuff. And Basil.
Is just because I'm at an org that uses Basil, I don't think there's an issue moving up to it. No, right?
Not with Basil itself, no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We use old ass stuff though. Yeah.
Got it. I had another question for you, Graham, about conferences, and I forget what that is. But are you lined up to speak in any other conferences?
Not yet. Waiting to see how the world shakes out over the next 6 months.
Yeah, me too. As much as I would have loved to attend Maxis Admin in person, I'm not much about getting on a flight these days and crossing international borders and things just yet. And yeah, I think the next few months with the weather getting cooler and people being indoors is going to be a big test for us all. I think the good news is, at least speaking from the point of view as a New Yorker, very dense population, we're not seeing the Delta variant sort of like rip through everything. So that's good news. I'm incredibly happy about that. I think vaccine requirements would make me personally a little bit more comfortable. I would like to see that on domestic flights. But yeah, I can't wait to get back to conferences in person, because while I think the virtual attendance has certainly allowed me to attend a lot more conferences than I ever could before, I think we're losing out on a lot, particularly in helping the new generation become a part of the community. That's a big piece of our jobs, I think, is to introduce new people into the community, help them put faces to names, help cross those boundaries. And then when everyone departs the conference, those people feel a part of the community, and they can feel a bit more comfortable maybe contacting someone and saying like, hey, I'm working on this thing and I'm struggling. Do you have any advice? So we're definitely missing out on that. And I think I noticed, like, certainly in my own talk from Mac Sysadmin this year, like last year, the pandemic was, it was a few months on. And I think I noticed across all the presentations, like people kind of had some fun with their presentations, and we're very sort of like, yeah, we're going to do this and get over this hump, and we're going to have fun making our videos. And then next year we'll all be in person. And then of course, this year it was kind of like good content, good material, but I didn't see across the board as much fun in the videos that people produced, mine included. It was definitely a bit of a, I don't want to call it a chore, but it was definitely sort of like work this year compared to maybe a little bit more fun last year. So I definitely think that's another reason we really need to get back to in-person conferences. So my plea to everyone, go get vaccinated, help knock this down. Let's get back and be in person.
For sure. Yeah, actually, I was just thinking about that, like what you said. Imagine how many people became Mac admins over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And then we'll just show up to conferences, and it'll just be all these massive new people. And then we have to go out. We'll have to be very mindful and go out of our way to I guess invite them into the community, but also kind of like just introduce ourselves and be sociable. And kind of, make this contact, because like normally you get like a trickle every year and you get to meet new people and that, but this is going to be like a big hunk whenever we get back to it. I'm thinking PSU Mac admins especially, just because of how big that grew over the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's going to be a big question, right? I know Macaduck had sort of like moved, canceled, and then just swung it back around to March 2022. So I think they're first up on the calendar. So fingers crossed that can, whether I go or not, like fingers crossed that that's an actual in-person event done safely.
Yeah, I mean, well, we were in person a week and a half ago in Maui.
Yeah. That's very promising.
And you were talking about, videos might be boring, but Joel's got a very entertaining video, which he made during that trip. So
if you can't be smart, at least be entertaining, right?
Exactly. Joel always has entertaining videos. And yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that like no one's videos were entertaining. I just noticed like just sort of this general.
I'm not offended.
I noticed this general shift from the previous year to this year of people just sort of being like, oh God, like, I want to stop making videos and speaking at people over a screen. But yeah, maybe you can talk to that. How was Objective by the Sea?
It was good. I mean, it was great to meet a few folks in person. Unfortunately, Sam was there, but you do what you can. But I mean, and they did it really well. It was widely spaced, and it was kind of good to get back into the flow of things. I was pretty happy to be there.
And in Hawaii, no less. So
Well,
But that's great. I'm glad that came off without a hitch. And I think we mentioned this in one of the previous meetings when Sam and I were talking about Objective.C, but I think, that was that was like the last Mac related conference before the pandemic. Like people were literally like,
people were canceling on the way there, and
they were canceling on the way there.
It was the week before the world shut down.
Right, and they were trying to make sure they could get home. Like, people had trouble like making sure they could get home. And I was wondering if it was going to be one of the last for this season, because like I said, as things start to sort of move increasingly indoors as the temperature in the northern hemisphere gets cooler, maybe we could all just come to Australia. Maybe that's the right answer. Just keep shifting hemispheres.
Sounds good to me. I have a whole bunch of places down there I want to visit, so that would work for me.
Maybe put it in for that at work as remote. You're gonna go remote for 6 months or so. So yeah, Macaduck, and then probably Mac DevOps. Well,
that'll be June, and then July and State College, and
yeah,
hopefully that all can happen again.
I hope so. So speaking of conferences and conference topics, Airbnb just released an open source project called Rudolph. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, Graham, even though I know you say your name is not on it. You're vaguely associated with it, and you're the closest to it here, I guess.
Yeah, I'm an interested observer. So Rudolph is a Santa sync server. So for those that don't know, Santa has two ways of being. Sorry, I should backtrack. Santa is a binary authorization tool, so you can allow list or deny list certain binaries or certificates or from running on your macOS fleet. Rudolph is how our clients talk to get their Santa rules. It's all serverless, runs in Amazon, Lambda, API Gateway, all that kind of stuff. So apparently infinitely scalable. One of its main selling points is that it allows you to sync every minute, which is the most that the Santa client lets you sync. Most are like stuck at 10 minutes. So if you're running in lockdown, like you have to allow list every single certificate and binary SHA. That means that your users can be like sitting there for 10 minutes waiting for it to sync before they can run their whatever it's they want to run, which is really going to make them super happy and not want to work around your tools at all. So we have that. That's the open source part. We have a in-house UI, which I believe they might be open sourcing, or a version of it. I'm not sure. Like I say, it's written by another team, so I'm not sure because that has a lot of business. The actual logic to drive what gets allowed list and what doesn't is obviously bespoke to pretty much every organization. So what works for Airbnb is probably not going to work for anyone else.
Yeah, I've seen some screenshots of it. It looks very heavily influenced by Upvote.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where the inspiration was taken from. And like the first port of call was Upvote. It's like, let's make this Python 3 and modern. We're like, that's a lot of work. We might as well just write our own.
Yeah, agreed. I was hoping to roll out Upvote at one point, and yeah, I looked at the state of the project, and it's a mess. And I think I noted in your talk just a week ago, or well, it was released a week ago, that you mentioned Upvote is sort of not in a state to roll out. And then I think it was during the conference last week, Google archived the project. So it's no longer even it shouldn't be a consideration for people at least anymore. And I had a similar thought of just like, well, yeah, how tough can it be just to sort of like fix it up and knock it back into shape? And it was like really severely out of date compared to updates on App Engine.
I'm glad that they did archive that though, because I think that's been like the biggest turnoff to Santa to people, because they're like, oh, Santa and Upvote, and they go try to set up Upvote and it doesn't work.
Yep.
Or they spend a bunch of time trying to get it to work and then give up. Like I know that I've personally given up because of that before.
Yeah.
So this will be helpful in steering people in the right way, in the right direction. So they might actually be able to deploy it.
Yeah. The flip side of that, however, is Google has, I would say, almost doubled down on Santa in some ways. So Russell and Tom were keeping the project alive for a very long time. I would say, I mean, they were the original authors, really, and they had moved on to other teams inside of Google, but they said, we want to keep working on Santa, and it was their 20% project. And I think they dedicated Fridays to working on coding and improving Santa. And then they just hired 2 people, like just dedicated to Santa as a client. So that's really good news. I would hate to see the client sort of suffer the same fate as Upvote. And I know they just pushed a bunch of new documentations. They got off of readthedocs.io and it's on Santa Dev now. And yeah, they updated a bunch of documentation. We could all use more documentation, of course. That goes for every project. So anyway, I think that's good news, and I think they do point to a bunch of different Santa sync servers there. You mentioned frustrating people in lockdown mode. Have you gotten people into lockdown mode? That's always nice.
I think we've got 3 or 4 teams
Okay.
on full lockdown now. It's been pretty painless, honestly. I mean, we haven't, as far as I know, there's been basically no complaints, which was, I mean, people do get blocked. I mean, because people run novel software all the time, like stuff we've not seen before.
Right.
But the process for getting yourself unblocked, mostly down to like having full control over the sync server. Like, so you can unblock yourself, and then within 60 seconds at worst, you're back up and running again.
Right.
And we have in there saying, you can go into Manage Software Center and click sync now, and Santa will download its rules straight away if you literally can't wait 60 seconds. Although if you can open Monkey in 60 seconds, you're doing pretty well anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's been okay. I mean, with the team that's running it is monitoring like the blocks and the unknown executions, and they're very careful about rolling it out. Like, we're not rolling out the teams that were chosen first were either determined for their I can't think of a better way of phrasing, their threshold for pain, basically. So we roll everything out to our IT team first anyway. They're our guinea pigs. So
okay.
They got it first, and it was mostly okay for them. And then the rest were like teams that are probably not running much interesting software. They're running like Chrome and maybe Office or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the keys to getting teams into lockdown mode is, if you're collecting logs from monitor mode, if you do that for 3-4 months, you have a pretty good data set of like, what does normal look like? And you can go off and allow list a bunch of certificates, probably Microsoft, Adobe, Google, a bunch of the big ones. And that probably gets like 90% of your use cases. And like you said, for people who are in marketing or legal or something like that, like they're pretty easy, low-hanging fruit to get into lockdown. IT, probably more difficult, but like you said, they have a higher threshold of pain, and like they're going to help you work through it. Developers are always the big challenge, right?
Compilers have been interesting. I believe there's been some issues with allow listing compilers. So if your Java and your Go developers had some fun there. Even me, I had to get myself out of lockdown the other day because I was building a relocatable Python, and because you run your pip installs before you sign the thing. So obviously our internal certificates allow listed, but when it's unsigned, Santa freaked out and blocked the whole thing, which was wonderful. At least it works.
Yeah. Good news. Great. And then I guess what are we seeing from you next, if anything? Anything on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm mostly getting out of the open source business, I think. I don't have time these days. It's a unless you're super lucky and get to, it's a project like Monkey where there's hundreds of at least people who are able to help support it, if not contribute code. It's a big time commitment, and being a Mac admin isn't really my job anymore. So it feels disingenuous to open source, and especially the things that they get to a point where the tools you build, to make them generic enough to be useful to other people is so super difficult. That's why our security team split out. Split out Rudolph and Comet. Comet's the name for the UI and the business logic. So it's the sync server is super easy to open source. It's much easier to open source that because it's just a set of APIs. But the logic and the decisions that go around feeding into those APIs are. I said I suppose we could open source it, but it's not useful to anyone.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. That. And I'm not saying this is because of me, but I definitely have noticed, like, I was a big champion of open source when I was at Google, and I've noticed a lot fewer projects coming out of that team since I left. And I'm not attributing that to me, but I do know also around the time I left, there was much more of a push to use the same tools as prod or, some other internal Google technology, which makes it so difficult to open source. It's just so intertwined with everything. So I can definitely understand that point of view.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, like talking with Victor, his point has been that a lot of times the patterns or the methodology is more important than the actual code, and just kind of knowing which way to architect something or which way to write it and which mistakes to avoid, all that stuff can a lot of times be the real thing that you learn, but that's like harder to communicate because like normally use code samples, but you give a code sample for that, and now people are like, okay, can I have help with this? And you're back to square one. But I don't know if there's a good way to communicate that, like the essence of it, without actually, the code side. But maybe you could just say, here it is. This is not for use in production anywhere. Leave me alone. That's completely entirely fair too, I think.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, in regards to Rudolph, I know that we're looking at doing an upvote server here too next year at Square. So that's exciting that that's out and available now. So hopefully we can get that stood up. Hopefully we can also contribute back, if necessary, if we've run into anything or what have you. But yeah, if front end, if that becomes available as well, be super happy to have that. But we might just integrate it with our internal stack, so it may not be necessary. We'll see.
Yeah, I think the back end is the harder part to solve.
Yeah.
Anyways, like with so many clients and so many rules and needing it not to fall over. Where if your front end falls over, or is slow, then it's okay.
Yeah, and like everybody has their own LDAP or whatever you want to call it, their own way of means by which they manage access rights and/or permissions to things. So making a front end, which is almost always tightly integrated with that, tends to be a pain, especially since a lot of the internal stuff does not use industry standards half the time because it's existed before they did. But so it goes.
And I was actually going to say, speaking of Google, I know one of the other things you mentioned during your talk, Graham, was using Google's identity-aware proxy. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, if you can speak to that. Just like how well it's working, what are you using as an IDP? Like, is it all Google, or do you also give off to, I think you might have mentioned Okta?
No, we use a different SAML provider. Yeah, it's one login. I don't know if that's secret. They send us little glass blocks for being an amazing customer, so I guess it's not secret. Which you sneak into other people's houses. Yeah, so it's IAP is, we initially did it to allow remote off corp access to like the Atlassian suite, so Confluence and Jira. So previously they were VPN only, or obviously the Corp network. And that's the initial. I mean, Sam can probably speak to this more than I can because he's on. If you go to the IAP landing page, you see his face. Literally. So yeah, it is an identity-aware proxy, including in the name. So it proxies stuff through Google's network, through a series of direct connects going to our own infrastructure. So it allows off-corp access to internal tools. And during that, it allows us those when it's going through IAP, it allows us to make rules based on who you are and what you're running. So integrates with your IDP to however you get your Google account. You obviously need a Google account to use it. Then we can make rules based on where are you, what device are you on, what patch level you've got, are you encrypted, have you got a passcode set? And now there's custom levels, so we can say, have you checked into MDM in the last 14 days? Have you run Puppet? Have you run Monkey? All those things. We can then make those rules whether you get access to this particular application or not. So it's not an all or nothing. We can say, for our URL shortener, obviously it's internal because every company has one for some reason. We don't care what device you're on, just you can use it. But if you want to access our admin backend for Airbnb.com, you need to be on what we consider a device with a high level of trust, fully managed Mac OS device or Chrome device, something like that. Or somewhere in the middle, like we require you can be on a mobile phone, your own mobile phone, but it's got to be in our MDM. So there's that. And then obviously IAP uses access context manager rules. So it's the same sort of rule set as if you use context-aware access in your Google Workspace. And IAP, they call it IAP, but it's not really a proxy at that point because you can use it to secure access to services that are running in GCP as well.
Oh, okay. It's been flexible enough for you because I know there are a bunch of competing products. Like I mentioned, I know Okta has one, Duo has one. There are probably other ones and other ways to do that. And I know Joel, who just dropped off, gave a talk on that at Maxis Admin.
Yeah, I mean, most of them seem to be based off MTLS certificates, which is fine, but that's kind of that's so I want to highlight that it's not an all or nothing because most of them you either have a cert or you don't. And that's not particularly granular at all. Or you get cut a cert at authorization time and not an ongoing basis. So how long does that cert last? I mean, it's not practical to reissue the cert every 5 minutes. So you're going to have access regardless of the state of your device for a period of time, whatever that is. With IAP, it's evaluated on every single request.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably like the biggest thing for us, that and like the APIs that we can make our own rules for everyone. I mean, obviously we evaluated lots of products and are always looking at them, and there aren't many where they're that flexible. You can write your own rules. There was only one I think we looked at, Sam, that you can do that.
Yeah, there's starting to be some more competition in the space, which is really good. But yeah, most of the stuff in the past, like I feel like I had something like this. It would, they call it like clientless VPN, so you could get to your Outlook web access in like 2009, and that was super cool. But like, it never really worked well, and it was never flexible. But like, I'm glad to see more things in the space. My two favorite features are that it's more performant for users than VPN ever was, particularly for users across oceans, because of like HTTP 3 and Quick and premium networks and all this business, but also that we can use it for authentication because everything's authenticated already. So it's adding signed headers to every request, which has user identification information in it. So if you just want to make like a simple web app with authentication in it, you just consume the JWT and you can do it with it whatever you want. You don't have to go re-implement some SAML library or OAuth or any of that. You get authentication for free, and we use that for a whole bunch of things.
Nice. Oh, and the other feature is that you can put your face on it.
You go talk at Cloud Next and say how amazing it is.
Yes. I think Cloud Next is actually this week, but it's virtual again.
Yeah, this is actually the first year I've signed up for JNUC ever, because I have to kind of pay attention to that now. I'm hoping that this is a long-term project to get rid of Jamf where I am, but at the same time, like, all right, it's a thing. I need to pay attention to it. Thanks, I hate it. But yeah, speaking of events, we're fingers crossed, hoping for a Mac event soon, I would guess, right? Hopefully Apple, I mean, they're going to announce Monterey. That's going to happen.
It's announced for next week.
Oh, is it? Did that happen today?
Monday.
So is there an event that goes along with that? I have been just nose down all day today, obviously.
Yeah, like Monday at noon Pacific, I think it is.
Oh, okay. Well, prediction.
So we get everything we want.
Based on the video, new laptops.
Okay.
Well, something that goes faster anyway. Maybe it's a car. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. And
You'll be able to sign into your managed Apple IDs faster because you won't have to chain load through 4 different IDPs to get there.
Any predictions or hopes, Graham? Anything that you personally want to see?
I want to see a new laptop because the graphics card on my laptop's dying, and I don't want to buy another Intel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, personal or work?
Work.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, both personal and work. I want to see a laptop at least with 4 ports.
That would sure be nice. Yeah, we have an M1 Air for the family right now for school and stuff, and that's been working out all right. But man, I've been tempted to get an iMac just because they look so nice, you know.
Yeah. I'd like to see some bumped specs. I know so I have the 13-inch M1, and it's been great. I like really no complaints, but I would love to see a 16 gig model, 4 ports, like at the very least. That's what I would like.
What about all right, there's gonna be a MagSafe like 3, and it's gonna be the size of a dinner plate, and you just put it on your desk, and then you set your laptop on it. It's just complete wireless charging. It would be great.
I'm trying to remember if people have tried that before, but that would be interesting. The only thing is that you couldn't move your laptop around. It would be sort of clumsy to carry around. But if they could make it smaller, I could see inductive charging coming to laptops at some point, I guess.
Well, maybe that's the future. You just have it on an arm mount, you know, on a boom arm, and it just holds it there for you.
Well, you know, I really missed how hot my Intel Mac got. So, you know, with the inefficiencies of wireless charging, I'll get back what I really need. We're gonna be heading into the winter. My hands are gonna be cold. We're not gonna have this problem anymore.
True.
Man, that's like old man Sam there. My hands are cold. It's winter. I need a laptop that's warm.
All right. Any questions for Graham or the group before we wrap up? Everyone's so quiet. All right. Well, with that, we're at about 50 minutes, which is a good chat. Thanks everyone for joining. Graham, it was great to see you. Hope to see you in person at some point very soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. And for anyone on the stream, see you next month. Thanks.